You are listening to the APSE podcast, the Association of People Supporting Employment First, with your host, Chris Davies.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Minnesota APSE video podcast and audio podcast. We're so excited today to be with you for season 2, episode 1. I think this is our ninth podcast in its entirety, and we're so excited to kick off season 2 with a wonderful guest. Her name is Katrina Simons. Say hi, Katrina.
Hi.
All right, and we're so excited to have Katrina here. She and I haven't seen each other in a few years. We've been a part of a couple different advocacy efforts over the period of time, and it's nice to make your acquaintance again and get to know you again today. And you're going to get a chance to get to know Katrina here in just a minute. A few housekeeping items. Again, this is a video podcast. You'll be watching it on YouTube and various other places. We're also now going into audio as well, and you'll be able to get it on Spotify and wherever you stream your podcasts. So however you're listening today, we're very glad that you're with us today. This was recorded on March 25th, 2022. And before we get going, I always like to remind people a little bit more about, Minnesota APSE and their purpose. They're a very action-oriented organization, and I like to actually read our purpose statement for Katrina and for everybody out there listening. So Minnesota APSE is an action-oriented organization, and we exist to bring people together to raise expectations so that people with disabilities can be employed, contribute, and assume their roles and responsibilities as citizens in their communities. Employment is the same wages, standards, responsibilities, expectations, and opportunities available to any working age adult. One person at a time, employment is the avenue out of poverty and isolation. And I know our guest here today definitely agrees with that purpose statement. By the way, I don't think I introduced myself. I'm Chris Davies, and I'm the host of the Minnesota APSE podcast. So let's get to it, shall we? Let's meet Katrina Simons. So Katrina currently is working as a community program specialist at the University of Minnesota Institute of Community Integration. And Katrina is very passionate about improving the quality of life for individuals living with developmental disabilities and their families, allies, and communities. So great to have you here today, Katrina. In your own words, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background.
Well, first of all, I'm so excited to be here because, like you said, we've worked together a little bit in the past, not a ton, but a little bit. And well, I've been hearing about Kaposia for years. So when I heard about this podcast, I was really excited. So thanks for having me. And then my employment story is a little bit windy. So I always love to start with that because it's a little bit longer than some people might expect. But I'm really happy to have it. So when I was 15, my first job was as a camp counselor at Camp Courage in Annandale, Minnesota. It's not called Camp Courage anymore. It's called Camp True Friends, but at the time it was Camp Courage, and I was just a junior counselor there. But I really liked it, and I got to meet all different kinds of people, and some people living with disabilities, all different types of disabilities. And I think from there, I just decided that I wanted to work with people with disabilities as a career, and so I kind of had that in mind. I guess my very first career aspiration would have been to be some type of provider in a medical setting, but as I started to do internships and things, I got really interested in policy and things on that end. So I interned at Gillette and Courage Center when I was in college, and then right after college, I worked for a little while for the University of Minnesota Medical School as like a a research program assistant. And we worked on a study that looked at quality of life for people with disabilities, ages 11 to 21, I think it was. And then I focused a little bit more on epilepsy after that. And then I went and kept doing some work at the University of Minnesota, but also went to work for the Minnesota Olmsted Implementation Office as a survey interviewer, where I went into lots of different settings, typically that house people with disabilities, and asked them a bunch of questions about if they were getting their needs met and they were living a life that ensured the quality of life that they deserve now by law under Olmsted. And then I came to ICI in 2017, and that is where I am now. So that's kind of my whole. There's some little jobs in between there that I've done. But
well, I can certainly relate to what you said, a windy road. My path has certainly not been linear by any means, either. But that's a really big deal, being part of the survey interviewing for Olmsted, and it's such a landmark decision that took a lot of time to really start to get activated. But that's really cool that you were a part of that. How did you? Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I would argue that we're still kind of getting acclimated, and it's still taking a lot of time. So it's an evolving process.
No, I totally agree. We've come, I don't know if you could even say a far way, but we've certainly made progress. But as we know, there's so much further to go, and that's why we keep pushing till it's understood, as Bruce likes to say. And so glad that you're here. So how did you get involved with ICI, and what are you doing for them specifically?
So they were actually looking for somebody that was living with an intellectual disability to come and join their staff and work specifically with their self-advocacy advisory committee. And I came and interviewed for that position, but didn't think I would get it because I do not identify as living specifically with an intellectual disability. And I didn't get it, but they were able to call me back and hire me for a different position that I don't think existed before I was there. So I interviewed for one job, but I ended up getting another job, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And I also know that you're here today. You want to talk about some of the recent history for employment or in employment for people with disabilities, and some of the barriers that folks are facing sometimes these days, and also in our history. So love for you to share with our listeners some of your thoughts about the barriers people are facing.
So that's a great question. Thank you. So I think that a lot of people think that since people without disabilities are aware that people with disabilities can work now, like there are jobs that we can do, and ADA and things like that, they think that everybody with a disability can work, but there's actually still a number of very complex barriers. So there's financial barriers, which is if you make too much money right now, you could lose your benefits in many states, and it's very complicated to determine which rules your state has, and whether or not you still qualify, and how to keep those services that you are using to stay alive and work. And then there's also transportation barriers and direct support barriers. So like a lot of people think that since some people with disabilities do work, that all people with disabilities have the same ability to work and to access that, but it's not actually the case. So I just like people to be aware of that.
Absolutely. And I think you have a term. I'm not sure if you coin this term, but a term, disease of low expectations. Tell us
Oh,
more
I
about
did
that.
not coin it. I'm not sure who did.
Okay.
I think I would get in trouble at my job if I used the word disease.
Yeah.
So I did not coin that term. Please.
Right.
Please do not get me
No. And certainly when we're talking about the disease, we're talking about the disease of low expectations that people have for people with working out in the community. So maybe just tell us your thoughts about how we can combat some of those, if you will, the phenomenon of low expectations that still exists today.
Okay, so I think there's a number of different ways to look at that. Number one, so anytime you have like a historical change, which we're kind of seeing right now in the current workforce and people with disabilities, people are going to see it one way when they're looking at it from the outside. And so you kind of have this, everybody with disabilities can work, or no one with a disability can work, because how could they? And we need to shift it sort of to the middle, we don't need the pendulum swinging. We need a nice middle ground. So many people without disabilities also can't work for various reasons, but many people with disabilities can work. I feel like is a good way to look at it. And then as far as the low expectations go, I think the most appropriate way to look at that is just hire somebody with a disability, and I think you'll be surprised. Many of my colleagues that work with me at ICI and on the SAC are some of the best colleagues that I've ever worked with, and many of them don't have a regular paying job right now because of the barriers that we just talked about. And I really think that the workforce is missing out. They're always in a good mood, not always in a good mood, of course. They have, the same fluctuation of attitudes and beliefs that we all do, but they're always professional. They're always on time. They do a great job with what we ask of them. I'm proud to call them my colleagues, and my guess is anybody else would be as well.
That's great. Well, I think really like the way you laid that out for us, and and you're right. We're all human, right? And we're all gonna show our humanness in whichever way it comes up. But the idea of seeing value in hiring someone is a way to really show you what's possible is right on. I agree with that wholeheartedly. So clearly, there's work to be done, right? There's work that has been done, and there's more work to be done, and we're also currently in the middle of doing work, like you and I are right now on this Minnesota APSI podcast, trying to tell stories and spread the word, and our belief is that every little piece that we can do just continues to build that momentum and open doors and possibilities for folks. So let's talk about value. I mentioned just hiring someone and seeing the value that a person can bring into your business. Let's talk about your thoughts on what you would say are some of you've mentioned a couple already, but what are some of the key values you see people with disabilities bringing into the workplace?
So in my experience, and I can really only talk about my experience because obviously I haven't worked with every single person that has a disability, but I think we have a great work ethic because many people with disabilities have had to develop a really strong work ethic just to get through life. And I feel like that translates into the workforce as well. And then the other thing is, I think we are very good problem solvers because we have to do it from the moment we wake up until the moment we go to bed oftentimes. And we can bring that new way of thinking and that different way of thinking into any job that we do. And I do agree that some people with disabilities are unable to work. I think that is that should be up to the person with a disability. And I believe that just like some people without disabilities can't work, some people with disabilities can't work. But I think that the general people with disabilities won't make good employees is selling people with disabilities short, and it's also selling their community short and the people who would work with them later. So I'm sorry, did I answer the question?
Yeah, no, you're right on. And there was something specifically in there I wanted to ask you. You talked about creative solutions, and I really like what you're saying about some of the lived experience creating good problem solving skills. That makes a lot of sense. That if someone is solving complex problems in their own life on a daily basis, that is a skill, and that skill can translate into lots of different types of jobs, certainly. So do you have any thoughts on, I mean, right now there's certainly a chronic labor shortage, and where do you see people with disabilities, that sector of the workforce, if you will, being an opportunity to solve some of those labor shortages?
Well, okay, and I hate to be too, I don't want to paint everybody with the same brush. Just like people without disabilities, people with disabilities can be wonderfully complex and fascinating and interesting, and you really have to work with each individual person and find out what's great for them. But I think so somebody with who lives with autism spectrum disorder, they might be really, really, really great at a task that involves a lot of fine motor and a lot of repetition, and they can do that really well because they can tune in and hyper focus. Whereas somebody like me, who's in a chair and sometimes able to get places, I can do really great things over the phone. So we can do a lot of different kinds of the work that you're looking to get filled, and some of us are just sitting here waiting to be offered jobs. Now, I'm not one of those people right now because I happen to be employed, right, but I'm sure there are others out there who are looking for that. And we have great skill sets, and oftentimes we're underemployed and we're not able to show people that we have great skill sets. And I think that's a real shame.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying about not wanting to paint anyone with a broad brush. Minnesota APSE, that's one of the reasons Minnesota APSE is very supportive of customized employment. Is the best way to help someone who wants to be employed, and we believe everybody that wants to work can work. And that's a real key, is that desire to work. And anyone, regardless of disability, complexity of their life, if they have the desire to work, we believe they can work, and there's a place for them. But that customized approach really says that everybody is unique, whether you have or somebody that identifies with a disability or not. Everybody's unique. No one's the same, and just because something is true about one person doesn't mean that's true about every other person. So. And
I certainly wouldn't want to insinuate, for instance, that everybody who uses a wheelchair is good at talking on the phone. But I have a very specific skill set that makes me an excellent telephone person. And I certainly wouldn't want to insinuate that everybody with autism is able to do fine motor tasks. Not everyone is, right. But those are some. I have known people with both of those skill sets that have disabilities, and I think we're getting overlooked.
Yeah. No, here, absolutely. Well, I know that you're a very positive person, and you have high hopes, for the future. So tell us about your hopes for the future of disability employment.
So there are two things that I'm really hopeful about in the future that I think are going to make it much easier for more people with disabilities to work, and maybe more people without disabilities as well. One is the direct support crisis getting mitigated a little bit by some legislation that will hopefully pass. But the other more specific piece of legislation that is more specific to employment is called the SSI Restoration Act. And what that's going to do more specifically is it's going to bring up the monthly benefit that people get every month to be in line with the poverty line, because right now it's less than the poverty line. So it's going to be a 31% increase. So that's really exciting. Another thing it's going to do is it's going to allow people to work more on top of their getting their benefit. Right now, if you make more, I forget how much it is. It's a really low number. It's like, $63.01. If you make more than $63.01 a month, you have to report that, and then that would get taken out of your check. And this will raise it to $394 a month. So if somebody, for whatever reason, any reason, felt they could only work like 15 hours a week, maybe you could do that. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing it's going to do is it's going to raise the asset level that you can have in your bank account. Right now, if you have more than $2,000 in your bank account, you get an angry letter and they threaten to stop your benefits.
Right.
And this would raise it to, I think, $10,000 for an individual and $20,000 for a couple. I'm not sure it's going to pass this legislative year. This is a really hard legislative year to get anything passed because of COVID and because, for any other, but I'm hopeful at the positive reception it's getting in the Senate and the House. And I'm hopeful because we have the Biden administration. I don't think it would have passed under Trump at all. Right. So, there we go. And then I'm really hopeful that some of the COVID relief money will help mitigate the direct support crisis. Right. And that could help more people work as well. So if they need like a job coach or, someone to drive them to work, because we just don't have enough bodies mm-hmm. to fill those needs. And then if people can't get their basic needs met, like getting up or going to bed, how can they go to work? I mean, we literally have people that can't get out of bed. And if you can't get out of bed, you can't go to work. I don't know anybody that can work in bed.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. No, those are all very, very important things. Do you spend a lot of time down at the Capitol yourself?
I don't spend as much time as I would like there. I should probably spend more time, but I have spent time there, and I'm staying away now because of the COVID stuff. But I have, in my life I've spent cumulative time there. Does that does that help?
Yeah, it sure does. It sure does. Well, there's a person I'm going to be meeting with who I was told only wants to make or does not want to make more than $200 a month because it will affect their housing.
Yeah.
Some of the things you're talking about, the Restoration Act, if I said that right, combat what he's talking about. It sounds like you had an answer, so I'll just stop talking and let you talk.
Okay, so housing benefits are actually very complicated, so I would need to know his housing benefits specifically to answer the question.
Okay.
And even beyond that, I would need to know a bunch of other information that you should not share with people outside of your immediate support network unless you're very, very confident. So please don't share any more information with me. You're not sharing more information, but I'm just saying if someone is watching this podcast and thinking, right, I should ask her, don't ask me, ask somebody who's more familiar with this type of question. But I think that's the hope. But the cooperation between HUD and people with disabilities is mucky, and I wouldn't want to say something that would be incorrect, but I definitely could see it being the hope.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Well, I will keep that in mind when I talk to this gentleman. And just in general, speaking about resources, obviously the work that you do at the Institute on Community Integration is providing great resources for folks. When you're meeting with somebody and you're trying to steer them towards a good place to get resources, what do you usually tell them?
That's a great question. My first go-to is DB 101. Mm-hmm. Often I'll kind of ask them what their situation is, and often if I think a certain provider has done this work before, I'll have them contact that person. But DB 101 is my first go-to for anyone. I gotta say, I'm not a social worker. I'm not formally trained in any of this. I just kind of learned it by being around for a while. And so I always tell people go to Pacer, go to DB 101, go to someone who really has training and funding to do that type of work. Because I don't have that funding or training to do what technical assistance like that. But
that's for our listeners, that is db101.org. It's
oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, website. No, it's okay. Website you can go to, right, where you can get connected to the experts on benefits.
Yep, you can also call.
Mm-hmm.
As a general rule, I say for most people, ABLE accounts are a good idea. So definitely look into one, but definitely call DB 101 before you start one, because there are some people who they do not benefit. So I like people to know about ABLE accounts, and then I like people to know that the limit is $2,000 in your bank account.
Right.
And most people can put the excess in their ABLE account if they can. But again, call DB 101 or maybe a specialized lawyer. Pacer has a bunch of lawyers that specialize in this.
Okay.
The other thing I get asked about a lot is guardianship. I don't know anything about guardianship. I know what it is.
Yes.
So
yes.
I would send you to Pacer to
Sure.
get your guardianship figured out. ICI is a big fan of supported decision making, which is a different legal alternative to guardianship. I certainly prefer that for most people that I know, but again, I don't like to comment on individual situations.
Sure.
But yeah, definitely look into your options. Call Pacer, call DB 101. I'm trying to think if there's anywhere else that I have people go. So if you're able to read a bunch of technical jargon, all of DHS's information about waivers and things is available online. So that's exciting. It's very hard to understand and complex. So that is tricky. Pretty much.
I found the Disability Hub as well as a good resource for professionals and families.
Yep, excellent. Yep. Yeah, it's really my go-to because you can call or go on the internet. I would say that at some points the rules are changing so fast that I would also check with, unfortunately, the Social Security Administration, and that is not a fun process, but it is necessary.
What about work programs or work, I should say, I guess you could say work programs or just employment in general for transition age students? What kind of work do you think we really need to be focusing on there?
Well, okay, so I haven't worked with transition in a while. It's been 6 or 7 years. But typically what I would let people know that they maybe didn't know before is that voc rehab should really be coming to those IEPs starting in like 9th or 10th grade, not just your senior IEP. So if you're a parent, I would be asking your child's case manager about that. And really, I would have the same advice for what type of work that they should do as I would for someone who wasn't in transition age. Find out what you're interested in, try a bunch of different things. See if there's someone in the community that's willing to sort of give you an internship and take a chance on you. Get connected with the school, see what they have to offer. So I wouldn't say, because typically, at least when I was in high school, and this is not the fault of the high school or anything, they maybe had like 3 or 4 different kinds of work that they had already found and the students could try. There's more kinds of work available for people. And I think that that's a great way to get people out in the community is if they can find a connection on their own. Certainly, I hope the school can give you a place to work and to try those experiences. But if not, it's fine to go into your community and see what you can find on your own. I don't know if it's changed since I was in high school, but that would be my advice from what I was experiencing when I was in high school.
Yeah, I think those are all really good pieces of advice. And it's also just sort of a natural way to go about it. I mean, most teenagers, kids growing up, they start, trying out different things, sweeping and mowing lawns and raking for their neighbors, or, helping with, family business of their friends, or lots of different ways they get experience to work, when they're growing up. And why should that be any different for someone who, lives with a disability? So.
Yeah, I guess my one piece of advice for people with disabilities that does differ is, if you're a parent or a caregiver or a grown-up involved with that child of any kind, start helping them identify their strengths. I can't tell you how many adults I know with disabilities who would be excellent in the workforce, but when you start talking to them, they start giving like an HR list of all the things, that the accommodations that they need. And that's great. That's a really important skill set. But it's also important to focus on the things that we can do and to put our best foot forward. And I think sometimes when kids have disabilities, we forget that.
Sure. That's
because we want to protect them, not because we don't want what's best for them.
That's really well said. And that's also an important tenet of customized employment methodology, is that it's really a strength-based methodology and strength-based way of looking at employment, because we all have things we're not good at. There's a million jobs that I would not be suited for, but when we focus on our strengths, then we find ourselves in places that we're going to find valuable, and places that are going to find value in us.
Yeah, and I think to be perfectly fair, I think especially these days, I haven't met very many people in the disability community, and I've been working in the disability community, living in the disability community as an adult now, which is different than when you live in it as a child, for at least 15 years. And I haven't met that many people who really would prefer to focus on the deficits. It's just something we naturally tend to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like one of those things, you got to watch out for your health, and you got to watch out that you put your best foot forward. So, I mean, we could start really young. You could start at 6 and, you're really good at talking if you're not good at riding a bike, because I'm not very good at riding a bike. But I mean, we can start real young, and we can kind of develop that.
Yeah. I've always had this saying that expectation starts at birth. When a child is born, you expect them to do great things. Period.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I'm just taking a quick look at my notes here, make sure I covered, everything. There is one other little bullet that I wanted to ask you about, and that's the idea of not just working, but establishing careers. Tell me about your thoughts on that.
Oh, I had a really exciting anecdote that I was going to close with about that. So I'm glad you brought it up right before we close. But I think, so one of the things that I remind myself of when I get bummed out about different things in the disability services arena, which unfortunately happens often, and some days happens more often than other days, is that if I had been born even, half a generation before I wouldn't have the possibility of having a career. And now I have kind of developed a career. I started as the camp counselor, and now I work as the community program specialist. So, and I have had a number of different jobs within the same arena that have let me do different things, and have changed how I think about things, and have made me a better advocate and a better person. And if I were even, 7 years older, I might not have had that. So we really have come a long way in such a short amount of time. And if we continue to do work like this and continue to pass that value forward, there's no reason that anybody with a disability shouldn't have that expectation of a career if they want it.
Well, I could not have said that any better than you did. I think that's a great way to end. I can tell you, I am really impressed with the work that you're doing, Katrina. And I wish you well as you continue to evolve and go through your nonlinear career development, as I like to say. I'm still on the path myself.
Well, thanks so much for having me today. I really appreciate you asking me.
Absolutely. It was really good to see you again. And if any of our listeners had a specific question for you, where could they find you?
So you can find me on the ICI website. Otherwise, people tend to see me around Minnesota. I mean, not outstate as much because I don't travel that well, but people tend to see me around the Twin Cities a lot. Yeah, just reach out. Again, remember, I'm not licensed or qualified to do anything. Yeah. So make sure you also reach out to those people who are trained to do that work. But I'm happy to talk with anybody.
No, I can really appreciate that. I think I noticed that you have a background in psychology and social work. And that was also what I studied in school as well. But I like to say I'm not a licensed practitioner either, but I know just enough to be dangerous, as they
right.
say.
No NPI number here. No NPI number.
There you go. I love it. I love it. Well, thanks so much again. You really have kicked our Minnesota APSE podcast off to a great start this year. And I just want to remind all of our listeners out there that if you believe it, you can achieve it.